here Wednesday, we were at prayer and I was shaking Charlotte down before she went home. I said, now listen, you're going to get some candy this weekend. If there are any Reese's eggs in there, Reese's peanut butter eggs, you know what I'm talking about? If there's any Reese's eggs in there, and so somebody was the deliverer of 6 Reese's eggs, which I may have already ate one, just saying. And then I hid them so Esther wouldn't eat the rest while I was up here. I don't have to worry about John. John hates peanut butter, fun fact. And so anyway, that's not why we're here, although, you know, Reese's eggs are a little bit of icing on top of a great celebration that Jesus is no longer on that cross, no longer in that tomb. The grave is empty and our hope is secured. And we have been for weeks now kind of slow and on purpose moving towards Easter. Strangely enough, if you weren't here, it may not make sense to you, but we started in the 23rd Psalm and just kind of grabbed back something that we might be a little bit too familiar with and really kind of put the life back into it, because it is talking about how Jesus walks us through life. And then we saw in the lives of Lazarus and Mary and Martha, just real-time example of Jesus doing the very thing that he does for us. And we skipped ahead and past the triumphal entry, and we talked a little bit about a fig tree and a little bit about God's expectations and finding life in us. And then we backtracked last week and we hit that triumphal entry because, you know, it's traditional, but it's also right and good. I wish we had taken this whole week and just pulled some of the highlights. Jesus had a very busy week. I even thought about that. Last night I was doing my final prep for the day, and I thought, I wonder what kind of week people had. From triumphal entry Sunday last week till today, or really it was again last night, because Jesus had a pretty full week. But we a lot of times rush past that in the church calendar. So what I'm going to do today is I'm just kind of slow and on purpose, point out some highlights from Jesus' week. There'll be some amazing stuff, some miraculous stuff, some stuff that maybe you didn't think about it that way before, some stuff kind of like in the triumphal entry, some stuff that we're gonna take claim to, point out some obvious stuff, correct maybe a little bit of bad teaching, and then we'll get to that empty tomb. Bad teaching sounds so hard. And sometimes, don't get me wrong, sometimes there are just heresies that just are put out in the church. You know, for bad intentions, for good intentions, sometimes we just blow it. I fumbled over some words last week, you know, just kind of said something odd. I'm not going to correct it this week. We'll talk about it when we get to the series. But sometimes you just flow. Sometimes you're trying to purposefully be misleading. Sometimes you just don't know any better. Sometimes you just pass on what you got from somebody else. Just kind of regurgitate bad information. Talked about that in Sunday school. Still free, by the way, at 9:30. You're invited. We've got seats for everybody. But we talked about the Queen of Sheba today, and I told William when I was a kid that I just was taught that she was from Ethiopia, and just accepted it. You know, yep, that's where she's from, and told him that it was even further cemented with the Ethiopian eunuch. You know, I call him the official because he was like the treasurer or something. He was a eunuch too, and he gets saved in the New Testament. And in my church life, those were tied together. That the reason he was in Jerusalem, the reason he was there is because of those ties that went all the way back to Solomon, that there was this Jewish thread of converts that came, you know, from the Queen of Sheba. And the truth is that they don't know exactly who she was or where she was from. The Bible calls her the Queen of Sheba, and some people think that, she may be from Ethiopia, and some people think she may be from Yemen. And then some people just shrug a lot because they just don't know. So sometimes you just were taught something and you took it at face value, but it wasn't necessarily the truth. Now, where the Queen of Sheba isn't really important in the grand scheme of things. But the one that we're going to hit on today, real important. And we'll get that when we get to it. But I'm going to be kind of meandering. I told William yesterday 27 and 28 in Matthew, but I'm really going to back up even further to Matthew 26. And I'm not going to read every bit of this. I'm just going to kind of walk you through. So Jesus has his triumphal entry. And last week we mentioned that, it doesn't read nearly as well as the account of the second coming of Jesus that we read in Revelation. Because in the second coming, he's on a white horse and he's, got a big tattoo on his thigh, and he, just from the word of his mouth, slays his enemies, his robes dipped in blood. I mean, he is an imposing, intimidating figure. And when you read the account of, Jesus and his merry band of misfits, headed towards Jerusalem, and they put him on a borrowed donkey. And folks who are of two types. One, just kind of, the citizens in general. And Jesus usually attracted a crowd of marginalized folks. People who weren't necessarily the cream of society. So along the side of the road, there's going to be some people who are like tax collectors and sinners and prostitutes and folks like that. And then the religious snobs who are going to be looking down their nose at everyone and just kind of, putting their 2 cents worth in. And again, here's Jesus, borrowed donkey. Doesn't really look like what the title says, triumphal entry. But, the truth is that he's not going to battle his enemies. Revelation talks about his battle against his enemies, that he, wins his word in the triumphal entry, as we call it. When he's on that donkey, he's riding to battle my enemies and your enemies, sin and death. And he did that by emptying himself out of his glory, not claiming what was rightfully his, but humbling himself and offering himself as a sacrifice. He, in both accounts, just has to decide that the battle is on and the battle is won, because Jesus never loses and never fails. So as soon as he, as William reminded us, sets his face like flint towards Jerusalem, as soon as he decides that it's time to go fight that battle, the battle is his. He just needs to claim it. And he claims it in humble obedience, which is what I was called to and am unable to do with any kind of consistency past the tip of my nose without Jesus' help. He does it perfectly, and so even though he knows what he's riding towards, he humbles himself and climbs on that donkey and he heads down the road. He's getting cheers and he's getting all this adoration from people who very soon will be cheering someone else's name and hanging him out to dry. In the course of this time, this week, what kind of week did Jesus have? Well, he's going to go to the temple and he's going to find the folks that he's already cleared out on one occasion are set up for shop again, and they're changing money at a high exchange rate, and they're selling sacrifices probably at pretty fairly inflated prices for travelers who just need convenience. It's hard to get an unblemished sacrifice from some area where you were dispersed to back in the day of your ancestors, and get that animal still perfect for the sacrifice. They're back again, and Jesus clears them out. He's going to get confronted by the religious folks and question, well, where do you get your authority? Where do you get off telling us how to do things, Jesus? We talked about that. He's like, well, okay, John the Baptist, was that just a man thing or was that a God thing? And they just shrug because they don't want to compromise themselves in their answer. And so he dismisses them. You can't answer me. I don't have an answer for you. They hate him. They hate him. You know, they have decided they're going to kill him. That's got to be tough. It's got to be tough. You know, there's probably folks that hate me and you. We're not even aware that we're being hated somewhere. Jesus knows every single thing going on in the mind of every single person around him. He's God. So he knows just how deep their hatred is. He knows all of the awful stuff. He just knows. And he's going to have a moment where he's going to look across the city and the term is lament, but he's going to be broken. He's going to talk about the city, but he really means the people, and he's going to say, you know, how I long to gather you. Like a mama hen gathers her chickens. She wouldn't have it. That's tough, right? You ever sacrifice for your kids just to have them turn around and be ungrateful? Not even acknowledging what you went through to provide for them. They just kind of throw it back in your face. Gosh, don't tell him I told you so, but one year, a couple of days after Christmas, I found some stuff that I had carefully picked out for my son in the basement in a box, stuffed in a closet, and he wasn't living with us at the time. He just put it down there out of sight, out of mind. I felt about it this big. They were trinkets, but it made me feel pretty small. Jesus is on a much more important mission than my Christmas shopping. And the folks who are his people and the folks who are the religious leaders of his people hate him. They're plotting his murder. And you know, it's very easy in 2021 to go, well, you know, they really just didn't know, you know, that they were dealing with the Son of God. But you know, in John chapter 3, you know, Nick at night sneaks over to see Jesus. We know you from God, or else you wouldn't be able to do the things that you do. That's what he told him in John chapter 3. They knew. They did not care. Jesus still has work to do, so it's Passover time. Get the disciples together. We're going to go to this upper room and we're going to have the Passover meal, but we're going to change it up a little bit. We're not talking about pulling you out of Egypt anymore. Now we're talking about pulling you out of sin and death, and that isn't going to be just a bitter meal that you have standing up with lamb's blood over your doorpost. This is going to be a bitter meal for me. But you're going to have bread and wine, and that's going to represent my sacrifice, my body broken for you, my blood poured out for you. We're going to do that next week. And then we're going to head to Emmaus. Even while he's having that moment, there's a devil in the camp waiting to sell him out. I don't know that we've ever done a sermon on the foot washing thing, but you know, Jesus washed Judas' feet. He walked to betray him with clean feet that his master The God of the universe washed. And, I mean, Jesus let him off the hook. He's like, just go do what you got to do. Dinner's over. Time to go pray. A little confusion about that whole Garden of Gethsemane thing, because Jesus says, Father, if there's any other way, can you take this cup from me? You know, folks, just we get the wrong idea, because even though Jesus is, you know, completely man, he's also completely God. We only give him completely man credit because that's the only perspective we have. So we're like, wow, you know, this is a hard thing. And Jesus didn't even want to do it. And you know, that couldn't be farther from the truth. He absolutely wanted to do it. Absolutely wanted to do it. So then why would he pray? If there's another way, will you take this cup from me? You know, that this whole mission that Jesus is on isn't for his benefit at all. I already told you, he's got all the glory. Everything belongs to his. The breath that you're taking right now is his. It's not your hair. Everything he's doing is for my benefit. Everything is for your benefit. And here's the truth. If you're going to follow him, he's going to ask you to do hard things. Uncomfortable things. Difficult things, hard things. You're not going to want to do all of it. And it's okay to ask for another way. You know how I know? Because of the prayer you prayed in that garden. And then, no matter what the answer is, you get up and you do what God tells you to do. It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to hesitate. It's okay to ask for a way out. As long as you press into him and you follow him in obedience. I don't know if anybody ever told you that before, but it's right there in the book. It's betrayal time on so many levels. Not only is he betrayed by Judas, but now there's the religious folks, and they come to arrest him. And they do. And Peter, big shot, big mouth, on the gas when he should be on the brakes. Makes me feel better about myself because I do the same stupid stuff all the time. He's going to betray him too. I don't even know him. 3 times. It always sticks in my mind the account where their eyes locked. I went through a stage in my life where I thought, boy, I can't believe Peter would do something like that. How dumb. I'd never do anything like that. Then I hit my late teens and early 20s. And it was a lot more than 3 times, I'll tell you that. As a matter of fact, there were times where no one would have even asked if I knew him. They would have been quite convinced from a good distance away that I did not. So, insults and mistreatment and fake trials, and they hand him over to the Romans to kill him. That gets us to 27. They just don't see it. There's no evidence. Why? Because he didn't do anything wrong. And, you know, that's something that I think gets lost in the story, too. It's important. Jesus' life is just as important as his death and his burial and his resurrection. resurrection. We want to celebrate those things, but his life is just as important. Why? Because we, all of us, are required to live a perfect life, blameless before God. Anything less than that is sin. And we know what the wages of sin is, right? Because we're, good Bible-believing folks. Death. That's it. So he didn't commit any sins. He didn't break Jewish law. He didn't dishonor his father and mother. He didn't kill anybody. He didn't do anything wrong. Falsely accused, turn over to people who are just cruel and mean. I mean, crucifixion is horrible. That right there is a beautiful cross. We sing about the old rugged cross. That's a beautiful song about an implement of death and torture, and you really just can't grasp it in your mind. I always point to, the Passion of the Christ, the Mel Gibson movie from, a few years back, because that's about as close as you can get to having a realistic portrayal. It's still just doesn't do it justice for how awful it was. That's the kind of people. The kind of people who go, you know what? I'm going to help you out, Jesus. I don't see anything in you that deserves death, so I'm going to have you beat so severely that you're not even recognizable anymore, so that people will feel sorry for you and will let me off the hook and I won't have to murder you. Because cruel people just do cruel things because they have a cruel mentality, a cruel way of thinking leads to cruel actions. That's what Jesus was facing, and that's what he got. Again, I point to that movie, and I'm like, you could still tell that was Jim Caviezel, so that's how you know it wasn't accurate. Because Jesus, you couldn't tell it was the same guy anymore. Again, everything that he did was for my benefit and for yours. That's the beating that I deserve. If I told you the stories that I'm never going to tell you from those years in my life, you would agree that's the beating I deserve. There's no doubt in my mind. I've got that coming and then some. It's one of my favorite lines from that movie Unforgiven with Clint Eastwood, and the kid's like, well, he had it coming, didn't he? And Clint Eastwood looks at him and says, we've all got it coming, kid. Romans helping Jesus out. I'll put him in front of the people. They call for Barabbas. Did that ever confuse you? When you were growing up, I didn't think about it a whole lot, taking it at face value. Well, it says in there that the religious leaders kind of planted that in their ear that they should ask for Barabbas and have Jesus crucified. But again, these are people who have, he was famous. Everyone knew who he was. He couldn't go anywhere without people following him, just crowds and crowds of people. They would follow him. They would just forget themselves, just follow him, so much so they would even bring food and he would feed them by the thousands. No doubt that there's folks in there that were lining the road when he rode into town, and they're calling for Barabbas, and it's more than just the church guys putting them up to it. I don't know if I'm the only one in the room, but from the time where I was saved until today, and even now, there's some stuff that I'm just not completely free of. There's some of that sin and some of that death that's still being pushed out of my life, and so there's still some things that I struggle with. And I tell you guys the easy, harmless ones, like I get impatient driving sometimes, and it makes good sermon illustrations, and it's a little bit funny, but the truth is that, there's times where I call a stranger a name. Usually it's a made I mean, all of that is just showing that there's stuff that's inside of me that's just not done yet. Again, I'm probably not the only one. Probably some of that is still left in you. Part of me that I know needs to die. It doesn't want to die. It's fighting to stay alive. And that's the part that would give us Barabbas to come out of my mouth. You know why? Because Barabbas doesn't make me look bad when I compare myself to him. He's a murderer. He is guilty of insurrection. Dictionary word. He's a troublemaker. Why do you think that we watch the dumb movies and the dumb TV shows and we're so good at pointing out the speck in our brother's eye even though we haven't been in ours? Because it makes us feel better about our own sin that we haven't or won't deal with. You should be calling for Jesus and begging for mercy, and then instead you're like, hey, give us Barabbas. I can continue in the sin that I'm comfortable with, and there'll be someone who's around that everyone thinks is a worse guy than I am. Makes me think of Lowell. He used to sit back there. Lowell was great for my ego. I'd walk up to him and he'd be like, I'm glad you're here. And I'd be like, thank you. He's like, yeah, now I'm not the ugliest guy in the room anymore. Thanks, Joel. I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm just saying he hurt my feelings. Anyway, that's how you end up calling for Barabbas instead of Jesus. Diversionary tactics so people don't notice how far gone you are. I told you Jesus got beat beyond recognition. They grab a guy, hey, help him carry his cross. I always liked that story. Again, we don't talk about that one enough. I'm going to speculate. Let's be honest, I'm just going to speculate. Here's what I feel. Even though Jesus got beat to the limits of his humanity, meaning he was weak and struggled under the burden, he's still completely God in there. So if Jesus chose to just, think of all the miraculous things that he did. Think of, and just think of the power at his command. And we talk about Samson. Samson just had, miraculous power on his own. Jesus owned that. If he didn't want help, he's like, no, I got this. He could have just, dug down into a little divinity, popped that thing on his shoulder, and strutted down towards the place where he'd be crucified. He chose to stay weak, take help from a guy that really don't know a lot about. So here's my speculation. Later on here when Paul's going to start writing letters to all the churches, he's going to say stuff like, bear one another's burden. We struggle with that a lot of times. There's a lot of times when William's up here and he's asking for a prayer request and you really need to make one. You're struggling. You're just either physically, mentally, something is just taking you to the woodshed. And you need to just raise your hand and be like, hey, you can pray for me. I've been taking a beating this week. You need to sit there quiet. Suffering in silence is what we call it. You know what else you could call it? Dumb. Because you're on a team. This is your team. In case you're wondering, like, it's a kind of a suspect team, you're called to the team that you're worthy of and is worthy of you, so you belong here. You're welcome. Anyway. You laugh, it's okay. This is your group. Raise your hand. You can pray for me. I don't feel good. I'm scared. I'm bothered. I'm troubled. I keep tripping over the same hole over and over and over again, and I say I'm going to avoid it, and I come back around and step in the same mess. It's your group. Raise your hand. Bear one another's burdens, but we don't like to because you have to humble yourself. And while Jesus is doing all of that stuff again for my benefit and your benefit, not his benefit, he humbles himself and lets another dude help him bear his burden. Speculation, but I think it's just a visual example of Jeff. Don't be so proud. Take the help when you need the help. Jesus did. It's okay. It's okay. Don't worry, we're right over time. They get that cross down there and they nail him to it. Again, I mean, just a cruel, cruel people. And, you know, for all of the name calling and finger pointing that Jesus did, rightfully so, it was always targeted towards the religious hypocrites. And I am aware of no story in the Bible where Jesus just slams on any Roman at all. They were just mean to him because they were mean people and they could, and they nailed him to that cross and raised him up so that he could die slow. He's going to say quite a few things on the cross. And that's, you know, a lot of preachers like to do that series where he said this and he said this, you know, behold, you know, your mother, it's your son, so that John could watch his mom. And one of the things he's going to say, which is awesome, and we'll talk about that again, is that it's finished, or tetelestai. I think that's pretty awesome. One that I think that we get confused about sometimes. Maybe we just get it wrong. He says, my God, why have you forsaken me? You know, again, I'll tell you what an idiot I was. When I was a kid, kind of a knucklehead, and I'm sitting in church, and you know, the guy's going on, and sometimes you're very attentive and you're hanging on the edge of your seat, and sometimes, you know, you're just not. You're kind of checking in and out until somebody says something that kind of catches your ear, and it draws you back in, but you didn't quite make it. And so, you know, the preachers would read it, okay? So, Eli, lama sabachthani, okay? It's how it's pronounced a lot. I'm probably off a little bit in the languages. Did I get close, William? Okay. So one day I was checking out, and it was that Easter when that was being covered, and I could have swore the pastor said Gabriella Sabatini. Anybody remember the tennis gal from back in the day? And so I'm trying to figure out what a tennis player has to do with Easter, and then I realized that I was just an idiot and I wasn't paying attention. My God, why have you forsaken me? And you know, because it was, you know, I told you I was an idiot, and you know, that hasn't changed a whole lot. But you know that. So, it was dark at noon. Jesus is on the cross. It's midday. The sky goes dark, and Jesus calls out. And the folks, when I was young, with great intentions, and somebody somewhere this morning is going to tell people that's when God turned his back on Jesus. And that is absolutely false. Okay? Absolutely false. The reason that they're going to give is they're going to say, because God is holy and he can't look on sin, and so he had to look away. You know what the problem with that is the Bible, God's book, says that he knew the end from the beginning. So that means that every sin that's ever been committed in the history of mankind from start to finish, God knew before he ever made Adam. He saw it all. It's also dumb because it makes God sound like some kind of big, giant, eternal sissy, like, oh, I can't look on sin. Dumb. Dumb, dumb, dumb. Now, make no mistake, God is holy, all right? As a matter of fact, let me see if I can get there with the when Jesus said that, not Gabriella Sabatini, when he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? He's quoting the 22nd Psalm. Now remember Triumphal Entry last week, it talks about Jesus riding on a donkey, and then there's a quote in the text from Zechariah the prophet, and I'm telling you that God is right on time. And the prophet said hundreds of years before exactly what was going to happen. And so when Jesus pulls that off exactly like it said, it's God calling his shots like Babe Ruth pointing to the wall. I'm going to hit a homer here. Watch. And so, years and years before, this is what was written. We call it Psalm 22. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me? From the words of my groaning, oh my God, I cry by day, but you do not answer, and by night, but I find no rest. Okay? Sounds bleak. It's a man's perspective. And again, Jesus, wearing his man suit, hanging on that cross, and he quotes that right on time. Here is the peak of despair for my humanity. Let me read you the next line in Psalm 22. Verse 3 says this, yet you are holy. Okay? This is where people go, aha, see, he's holy. He can't look on sin. Wrong. You're holy. You're not like me. You're not petty. You're not silly. You're not wishy-washy. You're not inconsistent. You are different. You are higher. You are better in every way. You are holy, enthroned on the praises of Israel. In you our fathers trusted. They trusted, and you delivered them. To you they cried and were rescued. In you they trusted and were not put to shame. It's impossible that Jesus said that out loud because God had abandoned him. He's quoting a psalm, and that is the first line, but the very next line is God will never fail you. Call out to him. He's got a perfect record. Maybe they just got it wrong when they told you that God averted his eyes. He did not. He did not. How do I know? Well, the story keeps going, right? He's going to say it's finished. I've paid off Jeff's debt, and I've paid for the rest of them too. If you have been saved by faith that you've put in him, and then have your name in there. It was Jeff's, Williams, Esther's. Keep going. It's finished. Paid their debt. And he says what? Father, in your hands I commit my spirit, and he died. It'll be kind of hard for God to catch him if he's looking away because of the sin, right? They take him down, put him in a borrowed grave. I had a classmate who got married in a borrowed suit. You could tell by the way it hung on him when he was standing in the front there. His young girlfriend had told him she was pregnant. And he just cried. See his shoulders shake. In a little country church in southern Indiana, and I nearly cried myself, except for pride wouldn't let me because I was a teenage boy. Boy, Billy Dean, what a tough day for him. having to step up and take on man's responsibilities, and like I said, you own the suit, you have to borrow one. Usually if you got to borrow something important for an important thing, it means that you aren't doing very well. And remember how I keep pointing out how Jesus humbled himself to be obedient. He didn't even have a grave. Got to borrow a grave. The good news is that he's not going to need it for long. But at the time when it was gifted to him, they didn't know that. Here's another sad thing about the whole thing. He told them he wasn't going to need it long, more than once. I mean, he didn't come around and be like, hey, can I borrow your grave for 3 days? But what he did say is that if you destroy this temple, I will raise it again in 3 days. They mock him on the cross. Hey, Jesus, remember what he said about the temple? Why don't you just get yourself down from that cross, hotshot? If he was petty like me, he'd be like, because I'm up here for you, moron. But see, Jesus was perfect and sinless. And the truth be told, I would probably be one of those idiots at the cross saying dumb things. Only going to need it for a couple of days, but borrowed graves. No. I mean, if I had had the opportunity and God had given me the faith to actually like leave my nets and follow Jesus around, you know, if he called me through a relative and told me how I was just, you know, lounging under a tree. I mean, if there was just some way where God had picked me to be on his team, and I'm telling you, I haven't been a good fit for that team because they're idiots. And I'm an idiot too. I don't know how I would have felt. Like, well, the party's over now. I thought Jesus was going to do big things, and they just tortured him, killed him. And would you just be scared? Well, if they killed him, guess who's next? I mean, he kind of told us if they hated him, they were going to hate us, but maybe he was just warning us to head for the hills. I don't know. I'm sure I would be like some level of scared. Maybe that false bravado where you're, you know, talking trash, but your voice is cracking. Tough days. Tough days. And you know, it's like we call them impossible, misfits and idiots and all that stuff. Well, they didn't just jump up and go rushing to the tomb, did they? The gallows. So many layers of great stuff there. So many layers. One, if the guys had really hung on his words, they would have been down there first opportunity. Just kind of say, hey, but they're laying low and they're showing, hey, you know, we're cowardly sometimes. They weren't the exception. There was work to be done, and the gallows were like on the spot. We're going to get this taken care of. And the other thing too is it's almost like Jesus read the script and knows how women are going to be treated, you know, throughout all of our history, and you know they're already being mistreated there. They can't be witnesses in any kind of court proceeding, and so they're the ones who get the honor. They're coming to honor him and then take care of his body, but the honor that they get is that they get to be the first witnesses. I mean, that's exciting stuff. Now, don't hear me, okay, incorrectly. I'm not saying that in that moment, God is elevating women far above men, because no. He's elevating them to their rightful place as his image bearers, who he loved, who are just as valuable as any other person that he created to bear his image. And so they've been slighted and mistreated, and God saying, nope, value. Leveling the playing field. This isn't an equal rights sermon, it's an Easter sermon, but it's just important to point that out. And I'll tell you, there's guys on the planet right now, religious leaders are guys who should know better, that are real handy at tearing down the work that God is doing through women. And I'm telling you, I see it here over and over again when guys don't step up, the women do. And God's the one that calls them and then the one that uses them. I'm not telling you you need to sign up for the next Beth Moore conference. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that if God is using her to teach and she's teaching correctly, then she's not cheering. Shut up. Not just get to talk to the angels, but they get to talk to Jesus. And they get to be the first people to go and proclaim the good news, the great news, the best news. Because I told you a lot of things through there, and some of them were kind of hard to believe, some of them were just incredible, some of them were miraculous, but the greatest miracle of all was that one right there, that Jesus rose. In Matthew 19, rich guy and Jesus. Hey, Jesus, what do I got to do to be saved? And Jesus tells him, well, follow the religious rules. Well, we're in luck because I did all that. And Jesus is like, awesome. Now, sell all your stuff and come follow me. And the guy's like, and kind of slips off because he's got a lot of stuff and he doesn't want to let it go to follow Jesus. And Jesus says, man, that's tough. You know how tough that is? It's easier for a camel to get through an eye of a needle than it is for a rich guy to get saved. Again, bad teaching. People are like, well, there is a little entryway through the wall of Jerusalem, and if a camel gets on his knees and shimmies through, okay, that's bad teaching. Jesus literally means it's easier for a full-grown camel to get through an eye of a needle than it is for a rich guy to get saved. And you know why I know he's not talking about some silly gate that a camel can low crawl through? Because the next thing he says, the disciples are like, oh, well, then who can be saved? And Jesus says, with man, it's not possible. You can't. There is absolutely nothing that you can do to be saved. It is impossible. If God of the universe, the one who created everything, the one who holds everything together by his will, says it's impossible, is it possible for you to pull it off? No. Unfortunately, the next thing that Jesus says, but with God, all things are possible. So I can't pay my debt. It's not possible. Can't give God something that already belongs to him to buy myself out of hock. You can't, oh, well, I'll sing you praises. Okay, well, you know what? If you're even going to sing, you're going to have to move oxygen in and out of your lungs, and your lungs and that oxygen belong to Jesus. Real quick, I always take Brian to Six Flags. So let's take Brian to Six Flags again real quick this year. So I like to go to Six Flags. I like to ride the roller coasters. And so I go, Brian, I want to run down to Six Flags. I want to ride the roller coasters. Brian says, well, let's go to Fiesta, Texas. It's closer. So we're going to go to Fiesta, Texas. I'm like, all right, are we in? He's like, well, wait, here's the problem. I don't have Fiesta, Texas money. As a matter of fact, not only am I broke, but I owe my father-in-law $50. So I can't go. And so I'll be like, hey, listen, don't worry. I got my stimmy in the bank from Uncle Joe. I got a little extra cash. And so I'm going to take you on down there. Here's what we'll do. I got this $50 right there. I'll go to Carrie and I'll give him the $50. And then boom, your debt's cleared. So I go to Carrie and go, Carrie, hey, Brian says he owes you $50. fresh 50 here. Will you accept this as payment for Brian's debt? And Carrie says, sure, no problem. So I come back to Brian and I'm all grinning. Brian, man, today's our day. Get in the car, we're heading down to Fiesta, Texas. And he's like, I told you. I'm like, don't worry about that, man. I already squared it with Carrie and I paid your $50. And Brian's like, well, time out, man. I told you not only am I broke, I owe Carrie $50. Thanks for paying my debt. I don't have any ticket money. Still can't get through the gate. And that's the miracle of Easter. Just like I could take him a little bit more of my stimulus check and I can pay his entryway, and that's exactly what Jesus is doing. I have to live a perfect, blameful life, blameless life, to be right before God, and it's impossible for me. And so Jesus comes down and he lives a perfect life. He never sinned, ever sinned. I mean, not even like one petty little thought. He never went like, when his mom said something, never, okay? Perfect life. When they are torturing him and murdering him, he never wished they were dead. He never wished bad things on them. You know, I know that because he's God. If he had, it would happen. But that's another sermon. Perfect life. Just beaten beyond recognition. The Bible talks about how God crushed him. He is absorbing the wrath of God that you and I deserve. Okay? So he's lived righteously on our behalf. He has taken the penalty, the crushing penalty, the torture and the death that you and I deserve for not getting it right. We're standing at the gates, and just so you know, St. Peter's not there. It doesn't work that way. We want to get in. We don't have any ticket money. And Jesus says, not only will I make this sacrifice for you, not only will I pay your debt, but I will take your sin, your shame, and I will give you my righteousness. That is the ticket. How do you know if it worked or not? Because Jesus lives a perfect life. He dies the death that I deserved. He's put into the grave on the third day. God raises him up. The debt is paid in full by Jesus. And the payment is accepted by God the Father. That's the miracle of Easter. Now, who wants to go ride the roller coasters at Fiesta, Texas? Or even better than that, the opportunity to have a relationship with the living God. Sure, there's going to be some struggles here. Jesus said so, but to know that he never is going to leave you. He's never going to forsake you. He's going to walk with you every step of the way. And not only is he going to be with you here, but he's going to see you across the finish line, and he's going to see you to forever. You have a relationship where you will see him face to face, and you will be perfect like him in every way. And you don't even have to wait till you die. You can start today. That's the offer that we have through the story that we cover. That's you, and you just are in love with him, and you know, it is a roller coaster ride. There are ups and downs and twists and turns, and it takes your breath away and sometimes scares you, but you know he's in the cart with you, and you're just loving the ride and looking forward to eternity. Then just celebrate today, and I'll celebrate with you. Maybe you made it into the park, but you just just been kind of sitting there watching things go on all around you, but you haven't really jumped in. You know, that's how this finishes. He's going to give us all jobs. Get in the game. I got some work for you to do. Go tell people. Live your lives and tell people about me. And it's an amazing thing. That just hasn't been your experience. You just kind of, you know, you put on the uniform, but you just kind of sit on the bench. Then today, just hear the invitation to get up and get in the game. Are you going to take some hard hits? Yeah, you bet you are. You are. Think about your life before then. Weren't you taking hard hits anyway? And they didn't really have any purpose or meaning. He can give those hard hits purpose and meaning if you give them back to him. If you're on the team but you haven't been in the game, get in the game. If you've been listening to the story over and over again for years and you love the story, but it's just not your experience, then today is the day where you take that offer. Give up your sin and your shame. Walk away from death back to life. Take the gift of Jesus' righteousness as your admission into eternity and be saved. It's a great ride. Maybe today for you it's none of those things. Maybe today you just come rolling in here just better. It's dark where you're at. You wondered why God has forsaken you. You thought it was possible. Let me reassure you, it is not. He sees you. If there's anything blocking, it's your view. It's covered by your sin. Don't believe that lie. Take sin. Call for mercy. Grab hold of him. Don't let go. I'm not going to let go of you. Leave here today knowing that he's got you. Let's pray. Father, I do want to thank you for the opportunity to be here again this Easter and to talk about that story. That great story. How not only did you come to seek and save that which was lost, but you did it perfectly. And not just people for a set place and a set time, but for all of us. So even here in this church on the side of the road in 2021, there's still just as much saving power as there's ever been. For those of us who are already saved and in the process of working towards eternity with you, we just thank you for that, and we just celebrate you today, and we thank you for your great sacrifice on our behalf. For the folks that need to be saved, I pray today is the day that you just grab hold of their hearts and you ignite that faith and lead them to believe, and they remember this Easter as that day, the day that you pulled them out of the grave. Lord, if there's anyone here just struggling, just needs your reassurance, just needs to know that you're there, that you've always been there, and you're not going anywhere. I just pray that you'll touch them, remind them, hold them close. Just give them the help that they need. All of these things, this whole conversation is only possible because of what you did for us, Jesus, and we just thank you for that, and we praise your name, and it's in that wonderful, beautiful, awesome name